Hey guys, OGalbina here, bringing you guys another Draft League Paldea Dex tier list. Today we're going to be going over the fire types in Generation 9, all of the fire types within the decks currently. If you guys do enjoy these tier list type videos, be sure to drop a like on the video, as well as subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 3,000 subscribers, and I would really appreciate it if you help us reach that end of the year goal. And yeah, comment down below what your favorite fire type to use in Paldea Dex thus far is. It doesn't have to be the best one, but whatever your favorite one is, let me know in the comments. Alright. With that being said, really quick, I kind of wanted to, it's not even really like discuss, but kind of talk about like a really old Draft League trope that kind of exists really to this day, and it's kind of persisted since the early days of draft back in Generation 6, which is crazy to say, but there used to be a common philosophy that you wanted to draft cores, and one of the like really important cores would be a fire, water, grass core. Typically, because as you guys know from just starter Pokemon, things like that, they cover each other very well offensively and defensively. And a lot of people thought, you know, obviously you were required to draft that core and a Dragon Fairy Steel core. And while those cores can be great, they're not necessarily the required thing. And I think the least required typing out of all 6 of those common typings is going to be the fire type. Typically, they don't offer a ton of defensive viability. Now, offensively, most of these Pokemon, or a lot of these Pokemon, are absolutely incredible and can be incredible assets to teams. And there's some applications where they have great defensive niches, like fire flying types, despite having that 4 times rock weakness with heavy duty boots in the game, have some really resistant, you know, key resistances, and their weaknesses are pretty well easily covered by other things. So they can have defensive niche and viability, but they're in no means required, like, you know, Draft League players of old would kind of tell you. And I think at this point, most people kind of know that, but newer players, they kind of do lean on these cores, and I kind of want to mention that before we jumped into it. Now, we don't have all too many Pokemon here today. It's really only Pokemon that are draftable in Paldea Dex as of post-home, I guess, because there's some Pokemon post-home. There'd be even less without it. So we're going to kind of go over them and kind of talk about their viability. Now, I might have, I'm ranking them based on their value that they offer teams. So they might not be like where they're at in our draft board. Let's say I think Volcarona is terrible, despite it being, you know, a top tier Pokemon points-wise. I might put it in D tier. But then Flareon, I'm like, man, this thing is peak infinite value at 3 points. I'm putting it in S tier. So it's not based on the price point in the draft board, because that would be easy and boring. It's more so how valuable I find them personally. Alright, now we can finally go ahead and jump into the tier list itself. First up, we have Charizard, just plain old Charizard. I'm going to go ahead and put it in C tier. It'll probably be one of the lower end C tiers. Now, pros to Charizard is it's really strong offensively, especially in Sun. With solar power, it can be incredibly powerful. Downsides, though, one, its niche is like a Sun abuser and like offensive, like non-speed boosting Sun abuser. It's kind of just destroyed this generation by all of the photosynthesis mons getting a boost in their attacking stats potentially when they come in, as well as just so many other strong fire types, so many stronger chlorophyll users that kind of take advantage of Sun in a more of a speed mannering way. So like, it's not very like meta defining when it comes to that. I'm probably not drafting Charizard if I'm drafting Sun. I'm probably getting something else to abuse said Sun. And the other thing that really hampers this generation is losing Defog and Roost. I mentioned it before, but Fire Flying actually is pretty decent defensively and has a lot of really cool resistances and immunities. But when you take away its ability to get rid of hazards, and especially its ability to recover its health, it's going to make it pretty tough to use these kinds of Pokemon consistently and to the best of their ability at the very least. So I'm going to go ahead and put Charizard in C tier. Next up, we have a pair of incredible Pokemon, honestly. Very solid at the very least, in Arcanine and Hisuian Arcanine. I'm going to put them both in A tier. Now, I think these Pokemon will play very differently. Arcanine, tried and true mon, right? It's been around since the dawn of time. It's very commonly drafted in every generation in which it has existed. It's going to be that bulky, intimidating fire type with a solid speed tier 95 and great attacking stats in 110 and 100, whether it being physical, special, or mixed. It can be very strong despite being very good defensively with Will-O-Wisp and Morning Sun, but it also gets access to extreme speed and close combat and play rough and things like that to really break some holes through some teams and be great offensively and defensively with that intimidate ability. Now, Hisuian Arcanine is going to be a little bit different in my opinion. Now, Hisuian Arcanine does have Intimidate as an option, which it definitely can do, but Fire Rock is a pretty lackluster defensive typing. It's honestly pretty terrible, to be completely honest with you. But something it does have access to is the ability Rock Head, and when you pair that alongside Stab Flare Blitz, Stab Head Smash, Close Combat, and Extreme Speed, as well as other great coverage that can, you know, work well in niche matchups and instances, this Pokemon is going to be absolutely incredible. Again, it can still throw off Morning Suns, it can still throw off Will-O-Wisp, it can still be that defensive set, But Fire Rock being 4 times weak to ground and water is pretty tough defensively, where offensively this thing is really going to shine. I think on Web's offense, I think against just fatter teams, this thing's going to come in and click a button. Like this thing with a Band or a Life Orb, even just boots 4 attacks, that's going to be absolutely terrifying. Still keeps a solid speed tier in base 90, especially for a rock type, loses a little bit, and gains a little bit more attack in 115 attack as well. Still serviceable bulk. What things it does resist? Oh, excuse me. But I think this Pokemon's going to be pretty awesome. I might even put it above Arcanine. I haven't used it personally, really, to put it above it. I don't think I have the sample size or seen enough people use it to put it higher, but I think it is going to be a really awesome Pokemon when it does, eventually launch. I think it'd be a lot of fun to use on the right team with some good momentum into it and, just clicking buttons, to be completely honest. So I think that'd be definitely pretty awesome. Next up, we have Tauros, Paldea, Blaze. I'm going to put this guy in B tier. This thing has proven to be very, very solid as a niche pick in the Paldea Dex format so far. With solid bulk, solid speed tier, solid attacking stat with a great dual stab and firefighting. It's really hard to switch into this thing if it's like offensive, like bulk up sets or bulk up Trailblaze sets, things like that. It gets wild charge for waters, but also very good defensively with Intimidate as its main option, whether it be on offensive or defensive sets. I think this thing is very, very viable and very, very solid as a lower tier fighting type and fire type. It can, really offer a lot to a team. It's a good Chien-Pao check as well. Now, you're not going to really appreciate a Psychic Fangs, but everything other than that, you kind of eat up really well. And there's not a lot of other Pokemon that can really do that very sustainably, which is cool. So, yeah. Next up, we have Flareon. I'm going to put Flareon in D tier, man. It's not very bulky, not very fast. It is very strong with, access to guts and throwing off big, strong hits that way. But realistically, there's stronger fire types, and there's ones with better speed tiers and better bulk. There's really no reason to draft Flareon. It's not going to function as that bulky wish-passing Eeveelution either. So, again, I personally don't see a huge reason to ever draft this thing, to be completely honest. Next up is going to be Moltres, and I want to check on a few things on Moltres really quick before we jump into things. It does keep Roost, which I think is very, very important, which is awesome. It did lose Scorching Sands this generation, as of right now, at the very least, but I really don't think it needs it. Fire Flying is an incredible stab offensively and defensively. We've already talked about it a little bit, but this Pokemon doesn't lose to things that made it very, very solid. It did lose Defog, I think, in general. Hold on. I think everything lost Defog, though. Yeah, it did lose Defog, which is a bit unfortunate, but again, we don't really need to use Moltres for that. We can run sub-pressure sets. We can run Will-O-Wisp to burn things. You can't toxic things anymore, but we can U-turn around. Flamethrower, Air/Hurricane. Really a bunch of things. And honestly, that dual step combination kind of hits everything it needs to. I think with a Terra, too, this thing could be very strong. Sorry. Whenever I record late, I'm kind of tired. I won't be yawning at all before the video, and then I'll just start throwing off yawn after yawn after yawn after yawn. But regardless, I think Moltres is an incredibly great Pokemon. It lost a few things this generation, but I think it's like a low-tier Terra Captain. It could be awesome. I think offensively it's great, and defensively it's obviously incredible, as it has always been. So yeah, that's going to be Moltres. Next up, we have Typhlosion and Hisuian Typhlosion. Let's rank both of these guys together. Let's see Hisuian Typhlosion first. I want to see if it has Eruption. It does have Eruption. Okay, that's good to know, with a little bit stronger of a special attack stat and Fire and Ghost. I'm going to put both these guys in C tier. Now, situationally and like strong offensive matchups, these things can go absolutely crazy with Scarf Eruption, Spec Eruption, things like that. I think a regular Typhlosion is a little bit better defensively because it has that Flash Fire immunity, boosting up its fire moves, really destroying opposing fire types and clicking any buttons. Whereas Hisuian Typhlosion has Frisk, which, honestly, in a draft league setting is a little bit better because then we can kind of scout and see if something's running an Aqua Berry or a Casted Berry for you or something of the sorts. They do kind of struggle in hitting fire resist. Now, they get Earthquake, but do not have extra Earth Power, which is, again, an absolute crime. Hisuian Typhlosion has a really cool move called Infernal Parade, which is a 60 base power ghost move that has a 30% chance to burn and doubles in power if the target is already status. So it is basically Hex plus like Lava Plume in one move, which is honestly very, very scary and very, very solid and tough to deal with in all honesty. So they can both be really good offensively, very niche to little defensive application, but they can pivot in on certain things. They do have starter bulk and starter BST, so it ends up kind of working out in a way, in that sense. Okay, next up, we do end up having the I almost said Houndstone, Houndoom. I'm going to go ahead and put Houndoom in D tier. I don't really need to explain it much. It's inferior in almost every way to a lot of these really solid fire types, whether it be in bulk, in speed, in raw breaking power, and sweeping potential, and things like that. It's just a very mediocre Pokemon as a whole, and not the toughest to deal with in the world. I'll be 100% honest. So we're gonna put it in D tier. Next up is Camerupt. I'm gonna put Camerupt in D tier as well, but at the top of it. Now, funny enough, in Generation 8, I would actually probably put Camerupt in C tier, just because it checked so many top tier meta-defining threats at the top end of the board. Things like the Zeraora, Koko, and Zapdos. Now, Zapdos is going to be in this generation when Home comes out, but it's not really justifiable to draft a last mon Camerupt to check just a Zapdos on your schedule, whereas before, really any electric, and especially Zeraora and Koko, were pretty much hard stuffed by this Camerupt. So it was very inherently valuable in anti-meta because of that. But other than that, and it's still decently solid. Fire Ground isn't terrible. It's annoying to switch into for some teams, and you can get up rocks and some things, and be a generally solid Pokemon overall. So I definitely think that D tier is a solid place for it. Next up is Torkoal, and Torkoal's tough. I think because of the prevalence of Sun this generation, I have to put Torkoal here in A tier. I'm going to put it at the top of it. Now, as a Pokemon, do I think Torkoal is this good? No. In no way, shape, or form do I think Torkoal is this good. It's just that the things that it enables and facilitates in this generation, where Sun is such a prevalent playstyle, and is so overwhelming if played correctly, Torkoal becomes inherently much more valuable in that sense. Now, once the dex opens up and we have other threats coming in and things like that, maybe Torkoal does kind of drop off in its viability, but until then, I think it's definitely worth an A tier because, it's very easy to draft and use and build around and all that stuff. So, yeah. Next up, we have Rotom. There's just a lot of A tier fires I'm noticing. I'm going to go ahead and put Rotom here. I'm going to put it at the bottom of A tier. I know this is kind of a hot take, because a lot of people think Rotom sucks now, because it lost Defog, and it lost Pain Split, and it lost Toxic. All three very big things for Rotom, but it's still incredibly solid. It's still Volt Switch around for free. Rotom-Heat is so incredibly obnoxious to switch into as well. It can still Nasty Plot, it can still burn or T-Wave things, which is obviously very, very good for it. It's just an overall very good glue piece and very good pivot. Volt Switch, Momentum Grabber, Fire type that's not really checked by Water types all too well as an Electric type not really checked by Grasses, and even some Grounds in most instances because they don't want to take an Overheat or a Will-O-Wisp or something of the sort. So I'm definitely a big Rotom fan personally, and I still think it's very good despite its big fall off. Alright, next up we have Pokemon that I am known for drafting as much as humanly possible, and he is so damn good if you can hit your Magma Storms. Big Heatran's going up in S tier. Not only is it incredible offensively and defensively and all these different scary, crazy things, but with Terra, I've seen this thing do some ungodly things. John Jr. has Terra All Heatran in Trick House right now, and I saw him sweep someone with a Terra Water Mono Iron Defense Body Press like Rest Talk set, and it was disgusting. I seen him turn into Terra Fairy a million times. I seen him turn into Terra blah blah blah. With its bulk and Flash Fire, really the opportunities are kind of limitless. It's an incredibly reliable rocker. Magnusmore plus Taunt just beats pretty much any stall ever, which is awesome. It did lose access to Eruption this generation, but I really don't think that matters, especially in a big game where there's very little Steel types running around the format. This is a very good one running around the format, so I think it's definitely worth an S tier spot. And from our first S tier, we actually go on to our second, which I think is going to be 2 of 4 probably, and Volcarona. And speaking of Terra Fire types that just go absolutely crazy, Volcarona is the definition of that. It's honestly behind Dragonite. It's the Pokemon I think of first when I think of terrestrialization. This thing turning into a Water type, or a Grass type, or Ground type, or even back into a Fire type, or even a Fairy type, or whatever it may be, makes this thing almost impossible to deal with in the builder. It is so tough to deal with someone who's using and playing with a Volcarona well. Trust me, it is not fun in a free tier setting, but even if it's not free tier and it's designated typings, just going Fire Water or Fire Grass is absolutely bonkers. It really isn't to be messed with. Like, this thing is absolutely insane and very, very tough to deal with overall. Next up we have Pyroar. I'm going to go ahead and put Pyroar in D tier, probably in front of Flareon. Just solid low tier breaker, decent speed tier, doesn't really offer much outside of that and has some pretty terrible coverage, but normal fire really isn't all that bad. There's not a lot of common Pokemon that resist that, and if they do, they usually don't have a lot of recovery. Pokemon like rock types, for example. So I'm definitely a big Pyro guy. I think it's pretty solid. Next up is Delphox. I'm actually going to kind of fill this B tier a little bit and put Delphox in B tier, which might be a hot take, but I think this Pokemon's actually very good. I think it'll be cool with Terra as a low tier Terra option if you play in a league that makes you go a little bit more lower budget on those Terras. Great speed tier, great special attack strat, great dual stab, gets great support moves like Wish, and what else? What other special or what do you call it, support moves. It gets Calm Mind and Nasty Plot, it can Agility, it can Dual Screen, it can even throw off a Trick Room, an Encore, whatever it may be, this thing is going to do it. It's going to do it very, very well, which is awesome. And again, just a really incredible Pokemon. Good coverage in Grass Knot, plus like Foul Play to deter setup, Dazzling Gleam. I think Terra Fairy this thing could be cool. Shadow Ball, obviously its dual stabs are incredible as well. So again, very, very good Pokemon. I think it's very, very slept on, and I think with Boots, when people get to use this thing on Wi-Fi, they're gonna kind of see like, oh man, I miss Delphox. It was a pretty dope mod. Next up though, we have Talonflame. I'm actually gonna hot take put Talonflame at the top of B tier. I feel like Talonflame in Draft in Generation 9 and Generation 8 was either you love it or you hate it. But I love it. I think it's a great Pokemon. Incredible speeds here. Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, Bulk Up sets, Swords Dance sets, great priority in Brave Bird slash Acrobatics with Gale Wings, sorry. And Flame Body is a great, U-turn to turn, big nuisance in that way. Boots allowed to hover above the ground without really taking any rock chip throughout the game. Just an overall very, very solid utility Pokemon. I think a lot of people kind of sleep on because it's not immediately threatening in a lot of matchups, but sometimes it actually is too. I don't know. I'm a big fan of Talonflame. I think it offers a ton to so many teams, and I'm, really enjoying having on the squad in BBR. It hasn't really shined to the potential I think it can, but it's a great Pokemon in Draft. It's an incredible Pokemon in Draft. Next up, we have Volcanion. I'm going to put Volcanion here in A tier, solely because of the niche that, one, it's a fire water type, which is a really solid stab combination, but two, it's really the only water type that can click Scald slash Steam Eruption anymore. It's gone from everything else, and Volcanion is here to click and burn things as a water type, which is something we could just always do before. And check out my tier list on water types too. It was the most recent tier list if you want to check out my thoughts on those guys. But Volcanion offers that. It's very solid offensively. Defensively, it's pretty solid. I like Assault Vest sets. I like 4 attacks boot sets. But with a Scarf and a Specs, it can be really obnoxious and do a lot of really scary things. No more Subtoxic Volcanion, which I think was also one of its best sets, but not the biggest deal in the world. You know what I mean? Not the biggest deal in the world. Okay. Next up, we're going to go ahead and rock out with Salazzle. I'm going to go ahead and put Salazzle at the top of C tier. Might be a hot take too. I know a lot of people really love it. Subtoxic corrosion sets are incredible, especially because Flamethrower hits, opposing steals and poisons pretty darn hard, and you kind of just Subtoxic protect on everything else down. You can ask about Scarf specs, things like that, but it's a bit frail for my liking, and it's very, very hard to position. It really does require good positioning and very aggressive play to get behind those subs, and often I just feel like those aren't super worth it to me personally, so I don't know. Next up is Oricorio. I'm going to put Oricorio under the assumption that you get all forms. Now this is the fire one, but if you get all forms, then you get the ability to Terra. This Pokemon's pretty incredible with the addition of Quiver Dance. Dancer is pretty cool in a lot of instances as well. So I'm definitely, pretty big on Oricorio right now. I almost got swept by one the other day by Sven, but got bailed by a crit. And I definitely was not as prepared for the Oricorio as I should have been, so that was definitely really cool to see. Next up, we have big Coalossal. I'm also going to put Coalossal. I think I'm going to put it at the top of D tier. Now, it's very close. I almost want to move it to C tier. And I've drafted Coalossal before and I've enjoyed it. But it's a bit steep sometimes for its price point, even though it's not all too expensive. But like as a budget spinner, rocker, spiker, it's very solid in that regard. And I think it can be very, very good in a lot of teams and be good in a lot of matchups. Some pretty solid abilities too in Steam Engine and Flame Body, both being good ones. Overall, very solid Pokemon. Now, I'm going to put the two NFEs down here in D tier because I know they're going to go there. Raboot and Crocalor kind of do similar things to their evolutions. Crocalor not as much, it's just kind of a fat, annoying wall. But I'm going to go ahead and put them in D tier, and we're going to go ahead and move both of these starter Pokemon up to S tier, in Cinderace and Skeledirge. Cinderace, it does what it did before, a little bit worse, albeit with the Libero nerf, but it's still going to come in, click U-turn, high jump kick, power ball, gunk shot, court change, taunt, super fang. Whatever combination of moves you're rocking out with, it's going to run them very well, be an amazing pivot, great speed tier, really hard to switch into over the course of the game, is great at wearing down its own checks and forcing its own progress, and an overall incredible Pokemon that also got access to Will-O-Wisp this generation, which I've personally got a ton of value out in the leagues I've used Cinderace in, so I'm definitely big on it there. And Skeledirge is kind of there for the opposite reason. It's not a fast hit and run, get in and get out type Pokemon. It's a Pokemon that clicks its dual stabs in Torch Song / Shadow Ball and Hex, depending on, what the set is. Then you're going to run Slack Off with either Will-O-Wisp or Yawn or whatever it might be, and be an absolute nuisance. I think if you can free Terra this thing too, it just becomes unkillable when it turns into a fairy or a water, or if you can see Dragon pop off because of its great resistance to everything besides fairy and dragon itself, and these being a pretty limited fairy metagame, not too bad in all honesty. So Skeledirge overall is an incredible Pokemon, especially with free Terra. I think if you draft it, you should probably make it your Terra captain, so it's a bit steep in that regards, because it's definitely not as good without it, but with it, it is a top tier Pokemon, and a very good Pokemon. Okay, Scovillain is going to be next. I'm going to go ahead and put Scovillain in the bottom of B tier, which is weird because it has incredible potential, right? Grass Fire is a really good stab combination, hits things very hard, best Chlorophyll sweeper in the game, but really I feel like Sun functions best right now when you're using Photosynthesis Mons and strong offensive fire types that like immediately get that boost and just run and just nuke things, if that makes any sense. So Scovillain can definitely still be solid, but its speed tier is a bit lackluster, and I think there are better ways to abuse Sun this generation, if that makes any sense. So yeah. Next up, we are going to rock out with Iron Moth. I'm going to go ahead and put Iron Moth here up here in S tier as well. I've been loving this thing in BBR. I loved it in Trick House where I had it as a Terra All Captain. I love it in the Smogon Tour. Every time I've used the thing, it's been incredible. With Terra, it just absolutely steamrolls and cleans teams. It gave me a T-Spike setter and Morning Sun Mon, and U-Turner to, play a little bit of support while being strong, but also just acts as that Fiery Dance / any fire coverage plus Sludge Wave and Energy Ball, Dazzling Gleam, and Discharge makes it very difficult to deal with this Pokemon over a long-term basis. And with Terra, it's been incredible. Free Terra in particular, I've loved it. I really like Terra Flying Hurricane 1 week for a Great Tusk, and I thought that was pretty cool too. So, yeah, definitely a big Iron Moth guy, and I think it's a great Pokemon, and one of my favorites to use this generation, in all honesty. Okay, next up, we got Fish. Funny Fish. We're only got 3 more left. We're at the end of Generation 9, basically. Funny Fish is going to go here, at the top, tippy top of S tier, right behind Volcarona. I don't think it's quite as good as Volk personally. That might be a hot take. Personally, I think Volk is a little bit more versatile and really rewards solid play and positioning a little bit better. Chi-Yu is very brain dead. You get a free opportunity to bring it in. You click on the Specs move, something dies. Very simple. You can be Scarf and be a great revenge killer as well. Nasty Plot sets exist, but they're not as good as just clicking a button with this thing. It doesn't have switches. With Beads of Ruin, it's just impossible to deal with. So it's definitely worth the S tier spot because it's definitely the most offensively immediately threatening Pokemon on this tier list by far. Okay, Ceruledge and Armarouge are going to be next. I'm going to go ahead and put Armarouge here in B tier, and we're actually going to put Ceruledge here in B tier, or A tier. No, I think Ceruledge is still... Yeah, I think Ceruledge is still a B tier. Now, I do rate Ceruledge a little bit higher than Armarouge because it is a little bit faster, a wee bit faster. But realistically, they kind of can set up and do a lot of damage, whether it be like Agility Weakness Policy or Calm Mind Armarouge, but more commonly, Swords Dance Ceruledge with Close Combat and Shadow Sneak and Bitter Blade and Shadow Claw and things like that. I would love for Ceruledge to get a stronger Ghost Step. Like if it got Poltergeist, it would be incredibly strong, or even just a stronger Ghost move being introduced in a DLC or something like that would be a big benefactor to it. Armarouge is very solid except for its awkward speed tier in the 60s. If it was a little bit faster, it would be an absolutely huge monster, powerhouse when it comes to wall breaking potential. But yeah, that is going to be our tier list. Pretty quick one today. There's not a lot of fire types in the decks, so I figured I might as well knock this one out. We did water last week, we did fire this week. Next week we'll do grass type. Again, let me know what you think of the tier list in the comments below. Let me know what your favorite fire type to use in Draft League is. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.